Hello, 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 everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Happy Friday out there, wherever you are in the world. I hope that you all have had a fantastic week. I hope you've been checking out our family in Philadelphia doing Black Cannabis Week. If you haven't, please make sure you go to blackcannabisweek.org. It's amazing, all the things that they had going on. Hope you got to catch some of those days. Visit their website to catch up. But if you didn't see any of our health is wellness programming this week, then you can also catch those episodes on our Facebook account, on our LinkedIn account, and on our YouTube channel. You can visit our website and the number 4mmunited.org. My name is Nicole Bafong. I will be your moderator today, along with my lovely co-host, Mr. Stanley Atkins, the Cannabis. How you doing today, Stanley?
I'm doing great, Nicole. We're going to be closing out Health is Wellness Week very strongly. I'm excited about today's conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Stanley Atkins, also known as Mr. Medic. And today we've got some great guests, and we're going to talk about cannabis and pregnancy. So I'm excited, Nicole, and thank you for this opportunity.
No, absolutely. Thank you for joining me, Stan. If you didn't see our events on Monday or Wednesday, we talked about sickle cell on Monday, and we talked about chronic pain management and cannabis use on Wednesday. So make sure you check those out. Share them with your family and friends. So I want to jump right in here. I'm going to bring up our lovely guests. And right after I read this astounding article, this insert from an article, and then this is how I want to start the show to kind of set the tone for what we're going to talk about today. So at a traffic stop, the police officer found a small amount of weed. Ashley Banks, a 23-year-old woman living in Alabama, admitted to the cops that she had smoked marijuana 2 days earlier. It was the same day that she learned she was pregnant. She was 6 weeks along. It was this disclosure that she was pregnant that led the county officials to keep her in jail without a trial for the next 3 months. In Banks' case, jail officials tried to send her to rehab, but after an assessment, the facility turned her away. Banks, they said, was merely a casual marijuana user, not an addict, and did not need inpatient drug treatment. Too healthy for rehab, but not trusted enough by the state to be set free. She was kept in limbo in jail. Meanwhile, Banks' pregnancy wasn't going well. She has a family history of miscarriages and was experiencing bleeding in jail. At one point, jail officials assigned her to sleep in a bed that was already occupied by another prisoner. She ended up sleeping on the floor. So when I hear stories like this, it's a trigger warning for me. It boils my blood. The fact that the Alabama still has this law on the books and they enforce it daily in Alabama, keeping pregnant women in jail, somehow claiming to be protecting the fetus. I know our guests today have a lot to say about this article and the work that they're doing all over the country to bring awareness around women being able to use cannabis while they are pregnant. So our first guest today, I would like to introduce both of our guests, but Dr. Felicia Dawson. She is, there she is. Dr. Felicia Dawson is the CEO of Plants for Life. And I would like for her to introduce herself, tell us a little bit about who she is, what she does, and also chime in on your thoughts about this article, Dr. Felicia, please.
Well, good evening, everybody. Nicole, Stanley, you all, thank you for having me on. I am a big fan of both of you and Minorities for Medical Marijuana. And I am an OBGYN. I am dual board certified in obstetrics and gynecology as well as integrative holistic medicine. I have taken care of the women of Georgia for over 30 years. I closed my practice in 2016 because I was getting a little burdened with the corporatization of medicine. At the same time, I was getting introduced to cannabis as medicine, which was a foreign concept to me as a physician because that's not what I learned about cannabis in medical school. I decided that once I closed my practice, I would devote all of my time to advocating, educating, and consulting for cannabis. I talk to my physician colleagues, I talk to patients, anyone who will listen, I talk about cannabis. And cannabis and pregnancy is really my niche because I have the most experience in that area. I am sick and angry about the article you read, Nicole. I I know that as cannabis becomes more legal, that pregnancy is becoming the new ground zero for the war on drugs, and women are being criminalized even more so than they were 10 years ago. So it's really disgusting. And I don't know what the laws are in South Carolina and Tennessee, but I know at one point Alabama, South Carolina, and Tennessee were the three states where it was a crime if a woman was caught with any type of drug in her system while pregnant. Those are the three states. I'm not sure if South Carolina and Tennessee are still as bad as Alabama, but to leave a woman in jail for 3 days straight or 3 months straight is horrific. And if you're caring about the fetus, you're not doing a good job because you're stressing them out.
And that's the problem. The fact that I'm sure men that decided to make this type of legislation came to the conclusion that it was safer for a pregnant mother during her first trimester or any trimester to be locked inside of a prison cell with her baby inside of her. It just shows how disconnected, again, these legislators and decision makers in this justice system is disconnected from the people in the community. And that truly is astonishing. Like you said, I was appalled when I read this article and understanding that this is happening to women all over the country. But Alabama is just one of those states that really pushed down on it really hard. And so as you left your practice, seeing, like you mentioned, seeing patients was just a little too hard for you because of the politics around trying to serve patients the best way that you can, understanding the commercialization that has happened to the medical industry. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you did after you stopped seeing patients and kind of how you transitioned into the CEO for Plants for Life, and what is Plants for Life?
Plant-based ancestral techniques, nutritional treatment strategies is what it stands for. I always forget it, but we're trying to push more of a plant-based lifestyle, and I am in it with my co-creators, Marilyn Pierce, who's a registered nurse and cannabis advocate, and Oski Chevanier, who is a cannabis warrior, fourth generation Jamaican herbalist. We are actually in the process of writing a book about tackling the most frequent causes of death in America and coming at them from a holistic standpoint and using botanicals and cannabis. So that's what we're working on right now. What my vision was after I closed my practice was that I would be what I've always been, the link between the conventional medical world and the holistic world. And patients who live in prohibited states like Georgia, well, it's not prohibited, but we have low THC CBD oil on the books, but we don't have the product. But my goal was to help those people who wanted to come off of pharmaceuticals, who have a physician who's not knowledgeable about cannabis or who doesn't believe in it, help them to transition off of pharmaceuticals into CBD or cannabis if that's their goal. But I don't just switch out cannabis or CBD for their pharmaceuticals. I always say, as a holistic practitioner, I'm looking at everything: sleep, diet, trauma, all those things. So I bring all of my holistic teachings with me to the cannabis space.
I think Stan, yeah.
Dr. Dawson, thank you for that insight. And when it comes to pregnancy and a lot of legislation, I do agree with the sentiment of a lot of support groups surrounding the fact that male legislators should have limits on the laws and things that they can do to control what happens with a woman's body. And I know that you've done a lot of work in the state of Georgia. I'm based here in Georgia. My background in healthcare, I've actually had the honor of delivering 9 babies, all in the pre-hospital setting. So, different vehicles, things of that nature inside of homes. And I know that prenatal care and postnatal care in Georgia is one of the worst in the nation. Now, one of the questions I have for you is, what are your thoughts regarding the first trimester of pregnancy and a mother's consumption, let's just say that mother does have pre-existing conditions, what would you advise or what would you say to a mother who is considering continuing her cannabis use after finding out that they are with child?
That's a big question, Stanley. Let us take it a step at a time. First of all, please know the laws in your state. If you live in Alabama, Tennessee, South Carolina, or Oklahoma also, despite the fact that they got a bazillion dispensaries, they have horrible laws concerning the way they treat their mothers who are test positive for cannabis. So first of all, know your state laws. Number two, try to interview your practitioners. It would be nice to have a provider that shares your healthcare priorities and philosophies. People don't know, well, some people don't know this, but you can just make a new OB appointment with a practitioner and interview them and see where they are. You don't have to get undressed and have a physical exam. You can just have a consultation. So, look for a provider that shares your values. After that, what I tell everyone, even the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists realize what a toxic world we live in, and they recommend detoxing if you can before you're pregnant because of all the makeup and skincare products and household cleaning products and the air, the water. I mean, there's lots of pollution that we're being exposed to. So, detox as much as you can. Try to eat organically as much as you can. If you can't eat organically, at least avoid the dirty dozen. Go to the Environmental Working Group, ewg.org, and they can tell you what foods you should stay away from if you can't, afford organic, clean spring water, fresh air, stress management, meditation, pregnancy yoga, journaling, get out in nature. That is so healing. Stretch, body work, acupuncture, acupressure. I mean, all these things, aromatherapy. There are botanical teas that can help with anxiety and stress and depression, and frequent small meals, complex carbs, protein. If you have done all of that and you still wish to consume, then I would recommend a third-party tested, organically raised, full spectrum product, which can be brought in through your lungs, orally, edibles, topical, suppositories. I discourage smoking, dabbing, and vape pens. That would be my answer to your question, Stanley.
And why would you recommend avoiding those three things, the vaping and the smoking, or those two forms? What would be your reasoning behind that?
Dabbing is, consuming a large amount of concentrated cannabis at one time, which can lead to hypotension. Your blood pressure drops. If you are not seated, you may fall. We don't want pregnant women falling. Vape pens have multiple moving parts. You have to worry about heavy metals leaching into your product when you heat up the vape pen. You don't know what's all in the oil that's in the vape pen. The plastic, there's so many things coming out of a vape pen. That's why I recommend an electronic vaporizer, because you can just put the dry flower into that and heat it up at a much lower temperature and get the benefits of the cannabinoids and the terpenes versus a bunch of combustion toxic byproducts. That is why.
Thank you for that, Dr. Felicia. A lot of people don't understand when I explain that, smoking is not the best method, that there are other methods of using this plant that are better for your body. And if you've gotten any disease, or let's say you're carrying another human being, you want to be as smart as you can with what you're putting into your body. And it's not necessarily the cannabis that could be harmful, but it is the form in which you intake it, right? That's
Yes.
right? Yes. Okay, thank you for that clarification so much. Have a
And,
follow-up? Yeah.
and I'd like to follow up, Dr. Dawson. I know that when it comes to medical cannabis, expanding medical cannabis programs, it all comes back to research. I know that you are a researcher and a clinician. Can you tell us about any case studies or any white papers or any literature that you've read surrounding the fetus and the harms or benefits of smoking? Is there any research that viewers may be able to look up, or can you give us any points that you remember from anything that you've read?
Well, I was encouraged about a small case study that came out of Israel late last year. 4 women who had hyperemesis gravidarum, which is severe nausea and vomiting of pregnancy, chose to use cannabis during their pregnancies, and they all did smoke, and they all used a high THC product or THC predominant product. One of those women was a physician. All 4 women did well. All 4 children did well, and that's encouraging.
Do you find with this research, that was another thing, Dr. Felicia and I share a platform as correspondents, news correspondents for a show called High at 9 News. And so we have to do a lot of research. When we read different articles, we have to understand where they're coming from, who's writing them, who's behind them. So when you do this type of research, when you find these different articles, how do you know, like, what is something that is genuine or has authentic, reasoning behind wanting to do the research, and the difference between that and somebody paying for the research to have a certain particular outcome?
Well, I must say that most of the research that I'm reading about cannabis and pregnancy, a lot of it is funded by the NIH, National Institutes of Health, or NIDA, the National Institution for Drug Abuse. Very, very rarely do I see it funded by a cannabis company. I know GW Pharmaceutical has funded a couple, but for the most part, most of these studies are funded by the government. And I don't know, it seems like 3/4 of them tend to be trying to show something negative about cannabis. And what bothers me is that they're using some of the same research that's been in existence for like the last couple of decades and applying new research tools to the same old data, which is retrospective, self-report, chart reviews. There's very few prospective studies done in real time, following people in real time and going forward. There's always looking back at a chart and failing to discriminate between, did they use other drugs? Were they smoking? Mood disorders, mental illness. That is a big issue that's coming out of late. We're learning that maternal stress, maternal depression, maternal anxiety, all of these things can also produce babies that are anxious, that are depressed, that have ADHD. So in my humble opinion, I believe that one day they're going to show that these negative, quote unquote, negative effects they're showing that's coming out in the kids, it wasn't the cannabis. I bet you it's going to be the mother's state of mind, the mother's stress, the mother's illness. That's what it is, because I just read a research study today about women who were pregnant during the time of Superstorm Sandy, and their children, and with no cannabis at all, their children are having some of the same outcomes: anxiety, depression, ADHD. So I really, really believe it is about the maternal stress that is showing up in the children, and it is getting passed down through their genes. It is on the children's genes. The mother's stress shows up on the children's genes. Their cortisol levels are elevated. So it's a real thing.
That was some great information, Dr. Dawson. And you really just hit on a point that I'm glad you hit it, because I want to bring this up during today's conversation. During my time in my work with Safe America Foundation, I had the honor of meeting the former First Lady of Puerto Rico, Ms. Beatriz Roselló. and she gave us a presentation regarding the hurricane that hit Puerto Rico about 4 or 5 years ago and the damage that it did. But also, she was pregnant during said hurricane. And the research and the physicians, the statistics have shown that as many as half of the women that were pregnant during that hurricane actually suffered miscarriages. And research is showing that those miscarriages are being directly correlated with increased endorphins and stress levels on the mom. So, for the ladies and gentlemen and all others who may be watching this show, understand that pregnancy and stress are directly related together. Women's bodies produce more hormones when they are pregnant because you got to remember, they're making a person, they're growing a person inside them. So their body is working in overdrive to produce enough proteins, hormones, chemicals, blood. They have to form bones. So please understand that pregnancy and stress are directly related. And as a male, it is up to us oftentimes, if we can, assist your partner, your sister, your mother, with those de-stressors, even if it's just warming them a warm bath, things that you can do to help reduce the amount of stress. And I really just want to touch on that. My next question, Doc, we know that there are a lot of clinical conditions that women may suffer from only when they're pregnant. Conditions such as like gestational diabetes. I have a family member that suffered from gestational diabetes, and it led me into the thoughts of cannabis and eclampsia. For the viewers who may not know what eclampsia is and preeclampsia, or their eclampsia is seizures that are induced by hypertension during pregnancy. So they're tied directly together. So these women's blood pressure will get very high, and I've actually treated eclamptic patients. Do you think that long term, with the proper research and education, medical cannabis, whether it's a suppository or sublingual, do you think it could potentially help with the symptoms of eclampsia during a mother who's having an eclamptic episode?
Eclampsia is a obstetric emergency, and you want fast acting things to protect that mom. I would not say cannabis would be appropriate in an obstetric emergency. You need the magnesium sulfate, you need the antihypertensives on board, the anti-seizures. I would not, no, I would not, cannabis would not be my first pick to treat an obstetric emergency. Obstetrics is a wonderful discipline. Lots of happy mothers and dads and babies, but things can go bad so fast and turn into horrific emergencies. You would not believe it. So to answer your question, I would say, no, I would not say cannabis is going to help with eclampsia. Now, maybe cannabis will help prevent preeclampsia, which is a lesser form of it, maybe help you not get to eclampsia, but eclampsia is an obstetric emergency. You want to deal with, that's one thing that conventional medicine is good about, is dealing with emergencies. And I would not try to use cannabis on eclampsia.
Thank you.
And Dr. Dawson, I know that there was some research recently that you reported on with our during our High at 9 news hour, and you mentioned how in this particular research, the name of the title of the research was "Cannabis More Effective than Prescription Drugs for Pregnancy-Related Nausea." And so when we know that cannabis can be an anti-nausea medication in some cases. And so when you read this article, this research, what was your understanding of what they were trying to say? And was it good research? Was it accurate?
And before I address what you just said, I'm just going to, for the audience, let them know that eclampsia is characterized by seizures, placental abruption. The placenta can come off the wall of the mother's womb and kill the baby. The mother could bleed to death. That's why eclampsia is such a scary emergency. Going back to the article that you're talking about, it was a survey done, and I thought it's as good as surveys go, showing that cannabis was more effective than pharmaceuticals in treating hyperemesis gravidarum. Cannabis was over 80% effective. 50% of them gained weight, versus the women who used the pharmaceuticals, only 25% of them gained weight and only 60% of them felt better. In addition, the people in that pharmaceutical group, 9 of them terminated their pregnancies because they could not take it anymore. Hyperemesis gravidarum can be so severe that people want to kill themselves. People can develop PTSD postpartum. And babies can, be small and have cognitive delays. So hyperemesis gravidarum is very serious. And I was very impressed that cannabis outperformed the pharmaceuticals. What I was surprised was the fact that they had to go all the way to Germany to get this article published. The researchers were from the University of California in Los Angeles and the Oregon Hyperemesis Foundation. So both teams were American-led researchers, but they could not get that published in America. They had to go all the way to Germany, to a German journal, to get that published. Thank God it still trickled down into our lay press. But that just goes to show you, I guess because the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and the American Academy of Pediatrics discouraged the use of cannabis during pregnancy and breastfeeding, and perhaps that is why they did not. I don't know if they tried to get it published in America, but it's awful that they had to go to Germany to get this done. Because I'm sure the pharmaceutical industry probably also had something to do with it. It's like, no, you can't let that out in America. No.
Yeah, follow the money, right? In the words of our other correspondent, Rico Lamite, he follow the money. When the research was actually done here in the United States with patients that were here in the United States, and they could not get it published, that white paper published here, it just goes to show you. And I think it's a shame, but this happens often, right, Dr. Felicia? We're looking at a society here. NIH is the government, and most of the time, the government is not going to approve research that shows and proves what cannabis does right? They will approve research. They will allow research to be published. They will allow research to be funded if it's proving what cannabis does wrong, like you mentioned when we started, right? And so it's unfortunate, and that's why you have to be very mindful when you're reading these white papers and reading research. If you are a pregnant mother, you're trying to understand better what to do as a pregnant mother, whether you should continue or not continue your cannabis use. Probably most of the things that you're finding out there is going to be negative. And that's quite unfortunate. Like you said, 2 of the main organizations here in the United States that do not advocate for mothers to use cannabis while pregnant. So in your research and in your work, Dr. Felicia, what would you say has been the most forward-thinking or the most surprising research that you have seen so far when it comes to women in pregnancy? Like, what has really been astonishing for you?
Well, I have to say, I'm blown away by the fact that how a woman feels, it changes the DNA of her children. That's been the biggest thing for me. What's surprising to me is that it's been known for a couple of years now, for several years. I think I've seen an article, maybe 2011, where they're bringing up this link between maternal mental state and offspring. It's just now kind of really coming out in the open. And I was so taken aback, because I just within the last year or so, I'm like learning this kind of thing. I even reached out to the American Board of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, who give us our board certification every year. And I said, I'm finding this research in these other journals like epidemiology and, I don't know, other names. Like there's over 30,000 medical journals in the world. And so it's hard to be on top of all of them. But I told them that, we can't just look at OBGYN journals. We need to look in other journals to get this information. I mean, the average obstetrician, I don't think, knows that maternal stress can cause their babies to have ADHD and depression and anxiety. That is not commonly known. It is not. And so
And
that's been the big thing.
and it's not caused by cannabis. It's caused by the stress, right? And if a mom is under stress and is trying to use cannabis to alleviate the stress, to reduce her anxiety, then we need more proper research to help us determine why that woman is stressed and not blame it on the cannabis. Well, thank you for that, Dr. Felicia. No, you wanted to say something else?
Yeah, I think it would be safe to follow women who live in legal states who are going to use cannabis anyway. I think it would be. I don't find anything unethical about following them, see how they do, see how their children do. In my opinion, if we can test the COVID vaccine on pregnant women, we can research this that we've been using for thousands of years. I'm just saying.
She dropped the mic on that, Dr. Felicia. Yes, ma'am. You are absolutely right. Well, we have our other guest on. Thank you for joining us. I'd like for Sheena Robertson to please introduce herself. Sheena, thank you for joining us today. Tell us who you are and what you do as the founder and CEO of Cannabis Noir.
Hello. Good evening, afternoon, wherever you guys are right now. Thank you so much for having me and your patience. As a canna mom and running a business, schedules sometimes go erupt, and so I apologize for my tardy, but I'm so excited to be a part of this conversation, especially with all of you folks. I love so much for a whole bunch of different reasons. But I am the founder, as Nicole says, of Cannabis Noir. We're a platform essentially that was developed to help create a more equitable and more safe cannabis space for systematically disadvantaged groups. And we do that by creating programming and networking opportunity, business development opportunities. And so obviously we are very active in the restorative justice space, and part of that lands and is a part of Canna Mama and cannabis and motherhood, and especially those who are adversely impacted by the war on drugs. Their experience with cannabis can be much more turbulent, like you said, and legal states is a lot different. So I'm a very big advocate for mothers who are interested or currently consuming cannabis, because I understand firsthand personally how much it incredibly impacted my pregnancy, especially from the first without and the latter with, and then obviously making sure that people who are in positions, basically Black and brown women, are not being unrightfully over criminalized and put in and given obstacles to properly take care of their children for this. So I'm very happy to be a part of the conversation. So thank you again for having me.
Of course. Welcome. And when we started, really quickly, I'd like to share with you an article. Briefly, I'll share with you an article that I read when we started about an Alabama woman who was jailed after admitting when she got arrested that she had smoked cannabis a couple of days prior. And at the time of her arrest, she also admitted that she was pregnant. She had just found out she was pregnant the same day that she last consumed. And so they made sure they put her in jail for the next 3 months. And that there's a law written in Alabama that allows legislators of the criminal justice system to do that to her legally, claiming that they are protecting the fetus. She, has a history of miscarriages in her family. She started bleeding during those months while she was there. They even tried to send her to rehab, and the rehab center sent her back to the jail and said we can't admit her. She's not addicted to cannabis, and sent her back. And she did, saying that she did not need to be admitted. So what are your thoughts on, and what have you seen? I know that you've done a lot of work with these types of moms, and what have you seen and the work that you have done? Can you share with us a little bit about that side and advocacy part of your work with working with moms that have had to experience this type of trauma?
Yes. a lot of the work that we've done is with people who we've done restorative justice work with, and in that sense, obviously they have a different, like I said, experience. A lot of them are hesitant to become patients, because of fear of things like Department of Human Services or CPS or whatever it is where you are. But these are very organic fears because we are all there's a stigma of Black moms and certain communities, and so to say that you are using cannabis also adds an extra layer of stigma that can be very, very dangerous. And so it's important, like I always say, like as we continue to like try to advocate and talk about this, and is to always also be very careful, and try to also consider like where you are, what your options are. Not everybody has the luxury of choosing their provider, but you definitely have to be vigilant about your care to the best of your ability, right? So if you, like look for people who, may better align with your needs, right? That might not always be the first couple of doctors you find, and it may not be easy, and from experience it's not always easy, but you ask the kind of questions, and try to create dialogue there where you can see where people are, right, and try to understand who you're talking to and who you're dealing with. I mean, I've literally experienced where I've had a nurse be very like candid and like, yeah, I think, cannabis side for your back would actually be probably better for you and the baby, but never say it to your doctor because he's older, he doesn't understand, he doesn't think cannabis is medicine. So it's like very important that you are vigilant also about your care and who you are seeing to support you. And it which is another reason why we try to offer resources and connect with spaces like this. And this is why these are important, because sometimes these are the only outlets available whatsoever, right? These are the only places you can get kind of the questions and or ask the questions and kind of seek out those answers. So
Could I piggyback on? Hey, Sheena. Could I piggyback on something she said?
Please.
Two things. I would be remiss if I did not really, really stress the fact that people of color are treated differently under the same laws. A white woman could be using cannabis in pregnancy, and she might just get a little slap on the hand or say, you might want to stop that, versus a Black or brown person may get reported to Child Protective Services immediately. So so just know that there's a difference between how white mothers and Black and brown mothers are treated in this country. Number two, really, really important to try to get prenatal care in some shape, form, or fashion, because if you show up to the hospital in labor with no evidence that you received prenatal care, they will treat you as if you were a drug addict, and they will test you and your baby, because that's to protect the hospital and the physician that's going to take care of you, to make sure that if any complications do occur, that all factors that may have contributed to that bad outcome are accounted for. So really important to get prenatal care, really important to be careful if you're a person of color. I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you for that, Dr. Felicia. Thank you, Sheena.
And ladies and gentlemen, you are hearing it straight from the source. As we've done all this week, Dr. Felicia is a specialist in her field, and Miss Sheena is a mother. And if you have a child, I think that makes you a specialist in this topic. And we've heard the same sentiment from both of our guests. Neither one of them were coached. They did not cooperate with each other to say this. And I want this to stick with you. If you are pregnant or may become pregnant, or you already have a child, please research your care provider. Find someone, as Dr. Dawson said, find someone that aligns with your beliefs. Find you a physician that aligns with your values, but also find you a physician and a treatment team that you are comfortable with. And that leads me into my question for Ms. Robertson. Ms. Robertson, we know that postpartum depression or depression secondary after they have the child is significant in America and it's all over the world. What are your thoughts on mothers consuming cannabis for postpartum depression versus psychiatric medications or antidepressants, which may be prescribed by a physician.
You're on mute, Sheena.
You're on mute, honey. We can't hear you.
Thank you guys. So personally, I um pharmaceuticals for me are not, in my personal opinion, are not healthy and not safe, right? And it's for me, I'm just not comfortable with that because I don't understand how it works the way I understand how cannabis works with my body, right? If I understood how the depressants interact with all of the things that are going on that they're maybe, right, like maybe, because then I could try to make sense of how much I feel like that could impact my child, and if so, how, right? But with cannabis, I know how what it does. Like, I know about my endocannabinoid system, I know about like terpenes, I understand the plant, like I understand that I should be like consuming by condition, right, in this space, right? Like, it's more like I don't need to just overall consume, I need to kind of figure out what my body needs, right? And the more I'm learning about the plant and how it affects me, I'm learning more about my body and how I can treat it and what it needs and what it responds to and what it reacts to. So and I don't feel like I would feel that or be able to accomplish that with like an ibuprofen or like, like um uh antidepressants, like those kind of things. Like, I don't feel like I can map that through my body the way I can do cannabis. And so for me, it was kind of like an easy decision to not, to be more interested in obviously using cannabis to support my needs, because then I also don't need, I feel like, as much, right? With cannabis, I can control how much I'm consuming. But whatever they give you, it's the dosage it is, that's what it does, and that's that, right? With cannabis, I can take a little, I can take a lot. If I need, like, I can adjust where I am and fine tune my medicine. And so I feel like it just seems like the safer bet. Quite frankly, I feel like medicine is imitating and simulating what cannabis does, right? Like, these drugs are artificially simulating what cannabis is doing naturally. So why go with the artificial version of it? So yeah.
You're absolutely right. That's why they call it synthetic drugs, because they're imitating the natural medicine, right? So recently, a good friend of ours here at M for MM, she lives in Las Vegas, and when she came to the hospital, went to a or hospital here in Las Vegas, had her baby, and the baby and her tested positive for THC, and it took her baby away. What advice can you give to women who might experience this type of trauma, families that might have experienced this type of trauma? I know it probably depends on the state that they live in, but Las Vegas, Nevada is a legal, an adult use state, and they still have laws like this on the books. And so what would be the advice that you might give? And this is for both of you, if you've experienced this type of trauma with anyone that you know, and what advice would you give them?
Well, I would, number one, say get the best attorney you can afford, number one. Number two, get some type of mental health support to help you handle the trauma that you're going through, and lean heavily on your family and support system is what I would say.
Sheena, do you have you had any experience with these mothers that have experienced this type of trauma? You're on mute. Oh, there you go.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, and it's heartbreaking, and what I try to suggest is to find like therapeutic services, like healing services, things that kind of support you through because on top of you being a mom, on top of you being responsible for the everyday, on top of you being responsible to the million other things you're most likely responsible to, now you have to deal with this, and how you deal with it can further impact you. And so, like, it's important to try to really find space to heal, right? And whatever that looks like, definitely you want to find supportive services and legal services, like I we we are trying to figure out ways to make sort of like a resource base for that kind of thing, because it is a very specific need, and it is hard to it is difficult to find some way to retain those folks and locate them. But yeah, definitely, finding legal services that's not always affordable, organizations and folks that, you could tap into to find help. Resources like that are always, never a bad idea. But I would more paramount than anything, just because like I suffer from anxiety myself. So I just know, like, if at least if that part is healed, and you're, like, able to be in a space where you're like, listen, how can I be proactive, like what can I do, like clarity for your next steps are your best bet. So as long the healthier you are, the better chance you have to come out of all of this better, right? So if for you and your baby.
And I wanted to circle back around to your choice, Sheena, to try to avoid pharmaceuticals if you can. One thing is that, pharmaceuticals are only tested for a year or two before they get FDA approval. And then people use these drugs for years on end. And then you have all these side effects, and they have to issue new black box warnings. So pharmaceuticals they have a very narrow range of safety, versus plants have a very wide range of safety. And talking about postpartum depression, cannabis works like benzodiazepines without the risk. You can die if you withdraw from benzodiazepines too quickly. There is a flavonoid in cannabis called apigenin that stimulates the GABA receptor. GABA is the neurotransmitter that makes us feel calm and helps us not feel anxious, that helps with the depression. Our 2-AG, one of our endocannabinoids, also helps GABA bind to its receptor. So plant medicine can do the same thing that a lot of medications can do. As long as we're not talking about an acute emergency, plant medicine can take care of most people's needs.
Thank you for that, Dr. Felicia.
Plant medicine is always the best. I know a lot of us who have been on the medical side, things that pretty much, ladies and gentlemen, every medication, whether it's over the counter or from a pharmacy, is a synthetic version of something that came from plants. I know that people look at me like, what do you mean? They had plants before we had prescriptions. And just to give you a quick example, there were many years ago, I want to say Hurricane Andrew or Hurricane Hugo in the late 80s, that tore up the Caribbean, Puerto Rico, Cuba. Why was this significant in regards to healthcare in America? Because one of the plants that destroyed almost completely during that storm was the nightshade plant. And why is that important? Because the derivatives of that plant are what they use to make Dilantin, a common seizure medications that many people consume in America to this day. And we're coming towards the end of our show. And Sheena, Dr. Dawson, I know that we're going to get a lot of questions. Please make sure you let everyone know how they can follow you, how they can find you, and how they can also keep up with your work. We'll start with you, Miss Sheena, and followed up by Dr. Dawson.
Okay, thank you guys again for having me. And I just also wanted to say really quickly, like, aspirin, it comes from willow trees. Like, that's like the original, like that's the start of, like, I think all of the foolishness. They were like, oh, we can make it. So I always say, like, that's, people always like, well, aspirin always works. I said, well, that's because it comes from plants. But yes, you can find me on Instagram, cannabis_noir, NOIRA. And our website is www.cannabisnoir.com. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. We have tons of resources, and we are always looking to connect with other canna moms and fellow advocates. So thank you again for having me. I really appreciate it. We are in the midst of like Cannabis Week, and so I'm super excited that, we were able to talk about this and such an important and monumental week that's happening. So thank you again.
Thank you all for letting me come out today and share with you all. And it's a pleasure meeting you, Sheena. And you can find everything that's happening out with me on my website, drfelicia.com. You got to spell out the word doctor, DOCTOR, and Felicia, FELECIA. I'm on most of the social media handles, and you can find all of that on my website. Also, my other website, Plans for Life, where you can find out what myself, Marilyn Pierce, and Oski Shivani are doing. We are, again, working on a book about treating the most common causes of death in America, using holistic medicine, botanicals, and cannabis to treat and prevent those things. So thank you again for allowing me to come out and share with you today.
And thank you, Dr. Dawson, and again. And before we get out of here, I really want to drop one comment from one of my best friends in the world, but also a cannabis mom. And she was given a panel speech one day, and somebody asked her, one of the questions was, "Oh my God, you have 6 kids and you smoke weed." Her response to them was, "I smoke weed because I have 6 kids." And I want to thank my best friend, Ebony Knight, for that little drop right there, because it put it into perspective for me as a man, not understanding the stresses of not only being a woman, but also a mother. And again, family absence here. Thank you all. And Nicole, please, send us off.
Oh, thank you so much, Stanley. Shout out to Miss Ebony Knight, miss her in Atlanta, Georgia, our part of our Canna fam down there. Thank you to these both lovely ladies for joining us today and really sharing with us their experience, their research, their knowledge about what it's like being a mother or being pregnant and trying to use cannabis and answering some of those questions. So thank you again for being with us. Thank you everyone for joining us for this Health is Wellness Week. We had such a great time hosting this. Thank you, Stanley, my co-host, for helping me with this. Please make sure that you go to bethematch.org. That's how you can find out if you're a match to become a sickle cell donor. Please make sure that you follow Dr. Uma Dhanabalan at Uplifting Wellness and the research that she's doing in Maryland. So watch out for her. Please you follow her. Make sure you're learning. She's got so much knowledge to share with us. And please make sure you're following Cannabis Noir and Dr. Felicia Dawson. Please and you all, if you have questions, anything that you want to know that maybe we didn't answer today, it's a blessing that we have these beautiful ladies and all of our guests that we've had this week ready to answer any questions for you all. So please reach out to us, reach out to them, make sure you're staying connected. Make sure you stay tapped in and tuned in. If you're in the Las Vegas area this Sunday, we'll be hosting a Project Clean Slate in Las Vegas. So join us from 11 to 2. You can find me at Purple Plant Magic at all of the social media platforms. Please reach out if you have any questions. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us for this year's Health is Wellness Week. There's going to be some more activities with Black Cannabis Week happening, so make sure you check that out as well. They're doing it live from Philly, but they're going to be streaming online all week. They go right until Sunday, so make sure you tune in and tap into that. Shout out to our family in Philadelphia. Roz is headed there today for an expungement clinic there tomorrow. So a lot of things happening this week. Make sure that you're tapped in and tuned in. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Please make sure you stay in touch. Go to our website, sign up. It's free to become a member. mmunite.org. Sign up right now and join our family. This is what we do. We do it because we love our community and we want to make sure that you all have the knowledge and the power to step outside and speak confidently about cannabis and your cannabis use. So thanks again, everyone, for being here. Y'all take care. Oh, Zion, thank you for your help. Thanks to our producer backstage helping with all of the fun stuff. So thanks again.